Today we sit down with Jason Foster, CEO of Cynozure and CDO Hub, and author of Data Means Business. Cynozure is a data and analytics consultancy, driving data solutions for a better tomorrow.
How do we prove what happens next? How do we improve people's lives? How do we improve people's careers? How do we improve how data and AI is used in the world for good rather than for dystopian things that you often sort of see it used for?
Jason provides an insightful overview of their end-to-end process, illustrating how it aligns with their core values and positively influences the business. We explore how these values are seamlessly integrated into the company's DNA, guiding their proactive collaboration with mission-driven organisations.
There are loads of really great brands that are neither trying to be very purposeful or very, bad in any way. For us, it's not sort of a marketing trick. It's a where do we want to invest our time and what do the team want to work on as well.
Our discussion also covers the unique challenges faced by CDOs and data leaders in a constantly evolving landscape. We also explore the importance of building relationships and adopting a community-led approach to business. Enjoy this insightful conversation. Jason, let's talk data. So you are the founder and CEO of Cynozure, the founder of the CDO Community Hub, podcast host, and an author of a book, I believe, as well.
It's all true, yeah.
Yes, so I am the novice and you are the seasoned entrepreneur. So interestingly, what did life look like for you before your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I'd spent three or so years in industry leading sort of data transformation at Marks and Spencer, the retailer. I did a whole lot of very, very cool stuff there. Prior to that, I'd done 10 years in consultancy, sort of doing strategic advice and guidance to organizations on how they think about data, how they think about metrics, and how they sort of use metrics to drive performance in their organization. And started my career in retail as well as like a project manager, business analyst. So I kind of like a bit of time in industry, bit of time in consultancy, helping lots of different organizations across sectors, and then set up the business. Amazing.
So how does life compare to being employed to owning a business? Very different, I imagine.
Yeah, it's different in some ways. I think there's quite a lot of talk about how you get much more freedom in when you're sort of run your own business, which is true to a certain extent, certainly in the early days when you're sort of crafting your way and you're deciding where to go and you're making the choices that maybe you wouldn't have got inside an organization. But as you grow a bit, it becomes more like an organization that requires and demands on you. So it becomes less freedom than you think.
Yes.
But still, the ability to craft your journey and what you do, how you do it, what you choose to spend your time on is much more flexible when you're kind of entrepreneur and founder and running your own business versus in a corporate. But I think there's so much opportunity doing either.
Sure.
I would really struggle to go back to corporate.
Yeah.
But I
unemployable.
Absolutely love. Well, I don't know if I'm unemployable.
Not yet.
Not yet. But yeah, no, it's similar in many ways. But yeah, the flexibility to sort of drive the agenda forward and take the hand of something and make it happen is much more straightforward in a kind of entrepreneur sort of side of employment, if you like. But life's pretty similar otherwise.
Yeah, I feel like the modern day business owner has different aspects to the business, like we just mentioned. And me myself, I've got Mirai as well as the podcast, as well as She Does Data, which is a community that we've created.
Right.
And I think it's because business now is more community led. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is. Early on, I kind of identified that building relationships was going to be key to growing the business, but not growing the business for sort of selfish purposes, but more for like there's an opportunity to galvanize people to kind of create a mission of improving something. And the thing in my case happened to be sort of data and analytics and data leadership as a sort of profession. So I kind of identified building community. I didn't really call it that at the time, but just building relationships, gathering people together and creating a business that people wanted to kind of hang out with, people wanted to, spend time with, people wanted to buy from, people wanted to join. I just sort of felt that kind of like trust and relationship side of what I did was going to be important. I didn't really know why at the time. And it has proven that, like you, I'm sure you're finding that it really does sort of build authentic relationships with people that ultimately lead to really good things for both sides of that kind of relationship.
100%. You learn so much through conversations as well, don't you? And that could help you in your day job.
Yeah.
So Cynozure was established in 2016.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
As in the business,
the name.
The name of the
the name.
Yeah. So we spell Cynozure with a Z in the middle, but there's a word that's spelt with an S, which is where it came from, and that word means a thing or a person that attracts attention by its brilliance.
Oh.
And the idea was that we're a professional services business. We help organizations, and we wanted to help those organizations attract attention. We wanted them to be brilliant. We wanted to help the individual that sponsored us in to do great things in their project, in their program, in their strategy, in their career. And then we thought if we could help those people to be better, that would help us as a business. So a thing or a person that attracts attention by its brilliance.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you're a purpose-led business. And what is the purpose?
Yeah. So so we're a for-profit company.
Yes, yeah.
So we have to make money.
Yes. Same here.
And there's a reason for that, right? That helps you grow, that helps you pay people, helps you give employment, that helps you invest in the things that you need to invest in, to get known, to do great things, to grow into different countries, all those good things. So you need to make money. That's definitely important. But the full purpose bit really is about there's got to be something more than that, and my sort of belief is that if we run businesses and organizations for the good beyond just earning money for the shareholders of the business, I think that drives something bigger and better than just profit. I mean, our purpose statement is data for a better tomorrow, and the kind of like the gem of that, if you like, the genesis of that is about how do we prove what happens next? How do we improve people's lives? How do we improve people's careers? How do we improve how data and AI is used in the world for good rather than for dystopian things that you often sort of see it used for or potentially used for? So that's sort of the genesis of the business, is like how do we do something greater than return profit to the shareholders, and how do we benefit and deliver sort of positive impact to all stakeholders of the organisation.
Yeah, I love that. How do you keep that within the business? Because that's your vision, but as the company's grown, it's hard to keep a grip on that.
It is, yeah.
So how have you implemented that within the culture?
So most of that comes from bringing in people that are, culturally and mindset-wise are that way inclined.
Yeah.
So who you recruit, who you bring in, their passions, their desires, their values, their behaviours are what keeps it tight, because you can write down what our values and our behaviours are, and you can have this sort of purpose statement, and we've got a vision and mission, but you can have all those things, but unless you have people that fundamentally are bought into sort of that way of thinking, I don't think you can have the culture that you want, and anyone that doesn't sort of live and breathe and behave in that way can jolt the sort of maintenance of that sort of outcome, if you like. But we have a set of values that we define. We talk about it. We act and behave. We sort of walk the walk. And one of the things that we did was, and this was only last year, was to become a B Corporation, a B Corp,
Fab.
which was about going, look, we're already an organisation that thinks about the way business can be a force for good in the world, and B Corp gave us a framework to assess whether we were actually doing good things. We thought we were, but were we? And there was a great framework that B Corp allows you to sort of test yourself against, but also give us a way of ongoing to improve us sort of iteratively in an ongoing basis, rather than just score us once and then move on. So we sort of judge ourselves against a global set of criteria that make sure we're putting the right things in place, and then just day to day we act and behave and make decisions that are beyond just about what's making money. We think about the impact on our team, we think about impact on our customers, on our community around us, on the environment, and that just helps keep us sort of centered to this idea of data for a better tomorrow.
Yeah, amazing. So we are at Mirai Investors in People accredited, but B Corp is definitely a path I want to take, and I know a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So could you just talk us through the journey of that and how long it took?
Yeah. So basically, B Corp, it's run by an organisation called B Lab,
Yes.
and B Corp is the kind of certification that you get, like Investors in People, and there are a bunch of criteria that they assess you on, and they're just about to change it actually. But there's a bunch of criteria that look at your organisation, how you manage, how you govern, how you look after your people. How you impact and interact with the community around the organisation, who you work with and the work that you do for them and the impact that it makes on them, and some other criteria. And there's a scoring system that marks you against how good you are or bad you are at those things. And there's a floor limit that you have to reach in terms of a score before you can go for certification. You self-assess, and then once you go for certification, once you've hit a certain score, it then gets assessed and audited and judged, and there's a whole load of steps and stages that it goes through for the team at B Lab to assess you. Your score gets adjusted, and then you end up with a final score, which if it's above this floor limit of 80, then you essentially become certified, and then you have to recertify. I think it's every 3 years, might be every 5. I can't quite remember. But it's a process, and you really have to like undo the whole business to kind of like to score yourself, and you have to be able to demonstrate all the things. So if you say you're like this, you have to be able to show that you're like this.
Yeah.
And it took about. I mean, the end-to-end process took about a year, 18 months. Our side actually wasn't too difficult. What we did early on was go, if we have to turn left in order to kind of be B Corp certified, then it's probably not for us. But we assessed ourselves, and we were like, right, we're doing a lot of the right things. So actually from our side, it wasn't that hard to sort of A, score ourselves, and B, demonstrate we were doing it, because we were sort of acting that way anyway. And then now we're a B Corp, and we you write an impact report every year that says the things that you did last year that impacted the world, and what your plan is for the following year.
Amazing. And what positive impact have you seen within the business after the certification?
Well, the team love it.
Yeah.
They're really behind doing it. We tested the idea of doing it with the team before we did it. We looked at whether it was something that would, positively impact or sort of hold us back and hinder us if we had to like measure and assess and score ourselves all the time. But we found it looked like something that would enable rather than, I suppose, destable the business. So the team love it. The badge that you've got it means that you're not just talking the talk, and you've not just got it written in a book somewhere, but you're actually doing it day to day. So great from a being part of the team perspective, and the team are always looking at ways to how we can move that idea and that agenda forward, and how we can do better things. It's great for recruitment, so bringing people in. It seems to have been a really positive sort of tick for people that are coming in that want to work with organisations that kind of have a bit of a purpose to what they're trying to achieve. And then the customer side has been brilliant. So one organisation we won a fairly major tender with, and one of the reasons that they gave us for choosing us was our B Corp credentials. Right. So much so that they're changing their procurement process to have it as part of their assessment of suppliers coming into their organisation.
Amazing.
So it's really helped for all those reasons. Customers tend to really like it. But it's not. We haven't done it for other people. We've done it for ourselves, and we use it to drive, the values of the business, create positive impact.
Yeah, I love how you mention about walking the walk as well, because values, mission statements, often maybe, when you're interviewing or on day one, you hear it and they're never spoken about before.
Yeah.
And I've done some work recently about winning strategy, and it's all about repeatability. That you're almost going to bore people. You think you're boring people because you're saying the same thing constantly, but they're bought into the journey, and that's why they've joined with you in the first place. But if you're like, this is our mission, this is our values, and then you never talk about it again, people then it just dies, doesn't it?
Well, there's some classic communication theory there, and how many times you have to say things for people to believe them. But I think so yes, repeating the message, but I think the most important is embedding it. So not just saying it, but embedding it. So for example, our values, when we do 360 feedback for the team, one of the things that I look at certainly is people's alignment or demonstration of, probably a better word, to the values. So we structure it sort of keep, change, add when we do feedback. Things to keep, things to change, things to add. Stop, start, continue is one we used to use. But what I do there is go, what are the values I would like you to keep showing? And where could you actually improve? So you're embedding them into not just talking about them, but embedding them in the way you manage people and people understand what they need to do and how they behave. Calling people out when they're not showing and acting and behaving in the way that the values suggest they should is another way. Also, we have a values award. So we do once a year. Everyone sort of sort of submits people for certain values, and then we throw them around and people win an award for demonstrating the values. And then we have the ultimate values award, which is like where someone has shown lots of them and lots of people have nominated them. So it's all about kind of like keeping the values at the heart of what you do, not just talking about them. And same with the mission. I mean, you don't need to talk about the mission and the vision all the time, but if it's strong enough, I think people know where you're going. And when we have sort of quarterly reviews, end of year reviews as a sort of whole company, we talk about how are we progressing towards those things? And when we set strategy, we set it in accordance with the vision, the mission, and the purpose that we've set. So we try and keep it all aligned.
Yeah, it's a good framework for leaders as well, isn't it? Because since we've embedded values, and we did change them after a year, because the first ones were like, didn't mean much at all. Yeah. Now it's like, it's a framework, and when you're hiring people, or unfortunately you need to have difficult conversations, we use a people analyzer tool, and basically it's aligning to the values.
Nice.
Because they committed to certain values, and if you're not demonstrating them, then why not? And hopefully we can help, but maybe the alignment isn't there anymore.
What's really interesting about that actually is you changing the values. Like, I think you can change the words, that's fine, and I don't think we've changed the words, but we didn't write them down until a few years in.
Right, that's sensible. I did them on day one.
Not for any reason. It's just you sort of start the business, and then you recruit people, and then you sort of the business is going, and you go, we better write them down. I think but what hasn't changed, even sort of before we wrote them down, is what it meant to be at the business, and we call it being purple now, which sort of our brand colours, but. So you shouldn't need to write down what it means to be purple, is sort of how I think about it, and in our organisation. But of course, you have to write them down for new people coming in so that they know. But if you just write them down and they don't see them enacted through all the other people they interact with, then they sort of don't mean anything. So it's sort of like the DNA. How do you get it into the DNA is sort of the really important part, rather than the words. But the words help cement it.
They do, and they give people a bit of guidance. Yeah. So Be Purple is one of your values?
It's sort of it's sort of the embodiment of all of the culture.
That's brilliant.
So sort of someone talk about purple people, and it's kind of just this whole idea of what does it mean to be at Cynozure. And the more purple you are, the more at Cynozure you are.
We love pastel colours at Mirai. So, Drew especially is on board with it. The studio, all the pens and stuff, the jumpers we wear, it's like we're morphing into the brand slowly.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, it is. So you mentioned, it's great that partners that you work with, they've really bought into B Corp as well. But part of being B Corp certified as being selective of who you work with. So have you seen a shift in that, and is it something you've always been conscious of, or as the journey's gone on you can afford to be selective? Although we're professional services, we don't just jump at any business, do we? We're in a position where we can be fussy and selective. So has that changed over time?
It has. So frankly, early days, it was whatever business we could get. And I won't mention who, but there was an organisation that we worked with that we definitely wouldn't now. And I cringe that we did. And it's unfortunate because I kind of feel that if I look back, it wasn't that we weren't following our values. We were just sort of, it was survival, right? It was like win work, deliver work, get the credibility, get some cash in the till, all these things. So, but no, we proactively go after organisations and try and work with organisations that are on brand, on mission, if you like, and we don't go after and we don't try and win business in certain sectors. So we won't work with tobacco companies.
Right.
We don't work with sort of oil and gas. We don't work with gambling companies, and we actively turn away work and contacts that approach us to sort of support them in those industries. We don't have it's one of the objectives this year actually is to improve the kind of like framework we use to make that decision. And there's some grey industries, if you like, where they're quite a high impact, say to the environment, but they're doing a lot of work to reduce their impact. Where do you stand? And B Corp help actually with in terms of the advice they give about where they stand, their position on certain industries. So we use some of that, but it's about the culture, it's about the values, it's about being purple, it's about deciding whether we go up, whether we try and work with some companies or not.
That, yeah.
So we actively target who we want to work with, and we proactively avoid certain industries.
Yeah. So what kind of companies do you want to work with?
As much purpose-driven companies as possible, but any organisation that is not doing harm,
yes,
definitely number one. But also where they're trying to have a positive impact, and you can get quite philosophical with what's good and what's bad actually, and there's not really much good without bad, and there's not really any bad really without much good that comes with it, because there's always employment, there's always money that's paying taxes, there's always positive in negative, and there's always negative in positive, so you can get quite philosophical about it. But we just want to work with organisations that want to do good things, that there's a cultural fit, there's a good chemistry with the team, that are trying to have positive impact. We work with a lot of charities. We work with a lot of organisations that are trying to be really positive environmentally. We work with lots of financial services industries that have a support underrepresented, underprivileged groups. So it's just kind of like trying to find organisations that are trying to have a positive impact.
Yeah.
There are loads of really great brands that are neither trying to be very purposeful or very bad in any way.
Yeah.
And they're also brilliant, great brands that we all know and like. And it's not just for us, it's not sort of a marketing trick. It's a where do we want to invest our time, and what do the team want to work on as well.
Yeah.
We bring a team in that work with us because of the way we are. If we then ask them to work on projects and clients that don't align with those values, then it's sort of the culture crumbles. So yeah, that's sort of how we try and think of it.
Yeah. So in terms of who you partner with, are they very much in the infancy of data strategy? Have they started data strategy, or are they at various phases of that?
Yeah, good question. So typically in the early days and up until a few years ago, our main sort of customer was someone who was relatively immature with their use and application of data. It doesn't mean they haven't done anything. It just meant that they weren't as mature as they could be. They were kind of like going, we're not really sure. We know we need to do something. We're just not really sure where to go, what to do, how to think about it, where to invest, what to prioritize.
Yeah.
So we sort of help them through that
a lot of
thinking.
Moving parts.
Yeah, and that's always the case, whatever stage you are, to be fair. But the ones that haven't done anything are just much less clear on what the first few steps should look like. So a lot of organizations that we work with for 6-7 years were at the kind of that earlier stage. There were some that were much later stage, and we've actually got a framework we use called the Level Up framework, which sort of assesses people against where they are on being sort of data guided, the phrase we use. But more recently, I think the whole market has shifted to being much more, savvy actually. So there's a sort of the baseline of low maturity, I think, has increased, and many more industries and sectors have started the journey. So some industries that hadn't really looked at this at all, and some that are sort of playing catch up, and some that digital native businesses that were like that they set themselves up as organizations that were data guided. So yeah, from a data strategy point of view, you can set that whatever stage you're at. You're always at a point, and you always need to make some improvement.
Yeah.
So it kind of, we help an organization understand where they are actually, because often they don't know if they're really far ahead, really far behind, somewhere in the middle, and we help make that assessment and help them work out what the things they need to do next to go faster or improve or deliver more value, set themselves up better for success, for their business strategy, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and showing them what's possible, because a lot of the time they don't even know that.
Aren't necessarily sure.
What value they can get.
Yeah, or often actually you've sort of got a data function that knows exactly what they want to do and where they want to go, but the broader business at large isn't really clear, and they're not sort of, it's not landing with them. So again, a lot of the work we do is to help bridge the gap between desires and aspirations from a data function and a CDO and a data leaders and the rest of the business who can be a little bit further away. You start getting into culture and organizational design and education and communication. So lots of business change stuff actually that isn't really data at all, but is the stuff that needs doing in order to make data successful in a business. Yeah, well, data strategy is very much business strategy, isn't it? Yeah, there's we the data profession get tongue tied with should we call it data strategy? Is it business guided data strategy? Should we not even have data strategy and it's just business strategy? I think it's quite good to have a phrase that means what is our approach, plan, vision for how we apply data to our business. Call it data strategy, call it AI strategy, call it a business strategy with data in it, like whatever you want, but you need to make some choices about what you do and where you go, and we call it a data strategy. It's nice and straightforward,
Yeah,
we think.
it is. So in terms of when those challenges present themselves, so the business and the data function aren't aligned,
Yeah.
who's approaching you? Is it the data function, or is it the wider business, or is it a mix?
Mix, yeah.
Is it?
So sometimes you have a data function or the head of data or a CDO that says, they're not listening, or I can't get budget approved, or I want to make this change but it's not landing. And sometimes it's unrelated part, a marketing department going, I'm desperately trying to build a single customer view or embed analytics in my team, or improve the personalization on the website. I just, my data team isn't delivering for me, or my data team, I don't even know if I've got a data team, or it's buried in IT and there's challenges there. So it can come from any direction. We've had a couple of clients where they've PE backed, and the PE company has said,
wow,
we've got no visibility, can you help us understand and give us, bit more sort of, the visibility of where we're going and the performance, and a bit more real-time understanding of how the business is performing rather than a monthly board pack. So it can come from anywhere, actually, and sometimes it's just about alignment. So sometimes it's like, actually you've got all the right pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. It's just about putting them in the right order and clarity and comms. Sometimes it's because it's not very good, or it's not there at all, and that bit needs fixing. So it just comes back to lifting the lid and going, right, you've got all these pieces. Some of these are further ahead than others, and now how do we nudge these all forward to get you all on the same page with what needs doing and what the priorities are?
Yeah, interesting. So do you have any success stories that you could share?
Well, we've worked with, probably over 150 companies across public, private, not-for-profit sector. The success stories range from, so sometimes if it's just like helping people work, like clear the fog is the success story.
Yeah.
And that with lots of organizations is the case. You kind of say, here's the plan, and they're like, thank God. And actually, we worked with, in the early days, we worked with National Trust, who are a very large, like one of the largest charities, not-for-profits in the UK, but they do so many things. They do conservation, they're a retailer, they're a membership business, some other bits and pieces. And that was really interesting. They had just finished a major transformation program, 3-4 year major transformation program across the business. And they'd sort of, the data bit had never quite got over the line. It'd never quite seen through. And the sort of exam question, if you like, was we don't know if we're on the right track, if we have a track, if we've got a train, or whether we're in a car. Like they just didn't know whether they were doing the right things or not. And so for them, the success story was, right, we can finish all of the kind of arguments between all the different teams about what we're doing and where we're going. We've now got a really clear path, a really actionable set of steps that we can go and execute against. And they went and executed against that. And that's common story across lots of our customers. And the other end of the spectrum is, an organisation that we won an award for this actually, who do fraud detection. And we built some machine learning AI models that help detect whether bots were trying to fraudulently apply themselves to websites. So it's sort of bots fighting bots, essentially. Right. So the benefit there was an improvement on tracking and stopping attacks, cyber attacks on businesses. So you've kind of got extremes, really. You've got these kind of scenario where there's a specific business outcome that's trying to be improved, like reducing cyber attacks, and you've got some very leadership kind of development benefits of helping people have a clear plan, which is sometimes forgotten how important that is for people.
It is, yeah. And I do feel for a lot of CDOs and senior leaders within data. And that's why I think it's amazing that you've started and created the CDO community hub,
Yeah.
because it is uniquely challenging, because a lot of CDOs and data leaders haven't had predecessors. They're carving their own path. Yeah. And often, in some situations, the board and wider business are totally in agreement and alignment. And other times it's like, what is data? What's the value? The budget's restricted. So is that, I suppose, why you created the CDO community hub?
Yeah. So exactly. So the CDO hub. So when I first started, we, in partnership with an organisation called Eden Smith, we put a breakfast. Cynozure had this idea of this thing called the virtual chief data officer, and the idea of it, this was back in 2017 maybe. The idea,
time, I like that.
What's that, sorry?
That was very innovative, I'd say.
Yeah, well, the idea was that we knew the CDO role was new, emerging. There wasn't many. There was more in the US, but in the UK it was quite new. There was people that had been leading data functions and insight functions, but the role of the chief data officer was quite new and emerging. And we knew that there was lack of clarity about whether people needed one, and we knew it was too expensive for some organisations that hadn't really got their head around it yet. So we thought, well, let's provide a service that was about sort of almost fractional CDOing into companies, and we were going to aim it at organisations like charities and smaller businesses that couldn't afford to bring in a CDO. So I had this idea, and we got this breakfast together alongside Eden Smith, and the idea was to get kind of 10 CDOs to say, look, what do you think of this idea? Basically, it was to test this idea before we went to market with it. Everything we do is always like test, let's see, let's iterate and go from there. And this was the breakfast to do that. And they were like, brilliant, love the idea, definitely think you should do that. What we want though is this, which was, getting together with other CDOs, chatting about the industry. And what we heard from them was that the bit of the big events that they go to, yes, listening to people on stage, but it was bumping into their peers at coffee. So I was like, right, we need to create that somehow. We need to create an environment where they're bumping into people for that coffee chat. And we put a dinner on for, it's just like 5 or 6 CDOs at the time. WhatsApp group one Christmas, I think that must have been 2017. And then it just grew from there. We had 5 members, then 10 members, then 15 members. And the idea was a sort of a safe space, as you say, for chief data officers to compare notes, talk openly. We didn't get sponsors or vendors in to kind of like fund it, where people sort of can be a little bit less open about what they talk. It was closed door. It was Chatham House rules. It was kind of like talk openly and freely. And we facilitated the conversation, but we always made it about it being sort of led by one of our CDO members. So we'd sort of help them come up with a topic and they would lead it. And then we met up monthly in person, and then obviously COVID, then we did that for a few years, and we had it the same time, the same place every month, so people knew about it and would turn up, and it was just a really nice way of having, and I used to talk about and still do about sort of setting the standard of what good data leadership or what world-class data leadership should look like, which at the time wasn't really defined. It's a little bit better defined now actually, and there's a lot more awareness, and there's way more CDOs. And now what you've also got is emerging data leaders, emerging CDOs, people who are progressing through the ranks, and they're at their early stage and haven't been through it before, but people have blazed a trail ahead of them, so there's things to learn. So there's this great scenario now in the community, which is you've got people who have been doing this for 10 years and longer in some instances, and you've got people that are just starting on the journey, and there's now some kind of things to learn for people. Yeah. But of course, the people that have been doing it for 10 years now need something different, which is, what's the next step? And they've progressed. Some have progressed to COO roles now, CMOs, in some instances MDs and CEOs. So they need something different. And so the idea of the CDO Hub is just to provide a platform and a community where those people can hang out and talk and share, and we've just started opening the door, if you like, to broader business leadership, because actually, it can be a bit of an echo chamber if you're just talking. There's a place for that and definitely needed, but it can be a bit of an echo chamber. And how do you open the door? Because actually the collaboration between the C-suite is where you win. So we're helping to collaborate between the C-suite within the CDO hub now to allow this to have much richer conversation about what really is needed to be done rather than what people think needs to be done.
Yeah, rather than, you don't want people all with the same perspective,
Exactly.
I suppose, in the echo chamber.
Yeah.
But you are right, and we've started events and very intimate numbers, maybe sub 50, because people can open up and be authentic.
Yeah.
Because if it's a big arena and a panel, and it's not an ego thing, it's just a vulnerability of a crowd of people that you don't know, or like you said, when you're networking, maybe there's panels, maybe there's not, but when you're having a drink and stuff, that's when the true conversation happens.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Recreating that.
Yeah. So where did the podcast come into this? I mean, you do like to keep busy, don't you?
Yeah.
And the book.
Yeah. So podcast, I think that was also about 2017 as well. So I actually had some advice from there was a marketing guy I followed at the time, Ahmed Manowar, great guy, and I had a chat with him, and he was like, think about a podcast, and I was like, okay, cool. I've got no idea where this will go or what it would do, but I just thought, do you know what? This kind of like mentality I had about let's just help people. Let's just give away everything we know in our heads. And we used to write a lot and share videos, and it's quite popular and common now to do that. But it was just about kind of like, let's just give people value. And I thought, podcast, great. I can talk to people that I either know or don't know, learn some stuff, and then share it with people. And I had a chat with a very, very good industry friend of mine, Pete Williams, and he helped. He was the first guest on the show, and he came up. I don't know if we collaborated on this. I can't remember how it happened in the end. I think he'll claim he fully came up with it, but the name Hub and Spoken, which is the name of the podcast, which is sort of a play on Hub and Spoke, which is a model that you have for organizational design. And it was just all about, at the time there was some technical podcasts on sort of data science and technology, but there was nothing that was focused on the kind of business side of data and the data leadership side of data. So again, it was just kind of how do we make that topic consumable. At the time, I thought I might even go as far as make it like almost consumer focused, like day-to-day non-industry business people kind of level, and talk to kids about how they perceive data and stuff like that. We never actually went that far in the end, but it's just open the door, open the lid, share stories, talk to people, broadest range of a bit like you're doing now, actually broadest range of the topic as possible. So not just sort of deep down into data, but broad across leadership and building teams and technology and AI and all these topics that essentially come together about running a business and being in a business. 200 or so episodes later, and it's great. And now there's lots more, and there's brilliant content out there, and we just keep going. We just think just turn up, and that's helpful for people.
So how many episodes now, did you say?
Over 200. I think we're on 210, 15, something like that.
Wow, I'll have to listen to your early episodes because I've only listened to the later ones.
Yeah.
Do you feel there's been a change in your hosting technique, or did it come quite naturally?
I don't know. I don't think so.
No.
It hasn't changed much. I kind of, again, the other thing I try and do is keep everything we do, obviously iterate and improve, but just the sort of the sort of genesis of it, I try and keep quite consistent. But no, I used to do some in person in like my guest offices. We used to do some in the studio. We made them all online. We did a lot more with the US, and now do a lot more with the US. So it's obviously harder to do that in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've sort of changed it a little bit, and we changed the frequency. So they were monthly. We went to fortnightly, and then I was doing them weekly. So releasing weekly, which I don't advise because that's a lot of work. But now we release fortnightly. It's a nice cadence. It gives the episodes time to breathe and the guests time to kind of like get behind it, and so it's a lot of fun, a labour of love. Yes,
you are right as well, because I see it as a passion project, and it is targeted at a data audience, but I'm not a data practitioner, although I operate within the data space. But it's a complete win if people outside of data also it resonates. Yeah. And my sister's friend was like, oh my gosh, I don't know why she calls it Let's Talk Data, because it's so much more than that. Although we talk about data, and it's like data's everywhere, and we want to empower people, and we really position it for the curious mind.
That's good.
Because, health, wealth, relationships, everything. People have data in their pocket or on their wrist and don't often know and know really how to utilise it in the best way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I wouldn't share every episode with my mum.
No.
But there are certainly some episodes where she's like, I'm not going to get this. And she listened to it and she's like, all right, I totally understood that. That was that was nothing. That wasn't what I thought you did, Jason. I'm like, yeah, well, there we go.
No, it's fascinating. Yeah, I think my family listened to the earlier episodes and now they're like, oh, you're fine now. You don't need the support. And do you find, I suppose, a lot of, your influencing and coming from a consultancy background, your audience in terms of who you partner with in a business sense, they're not always data leaders anyway, are they? So part of what you do is influencing those outside of the data space.
Yeah. So exactly. So the podcast isn't specifically targeted at data people. It's in fact we want it to be broad. It's more, so I suppose it's more focused on leadership.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it's not good for people who aren't in leadership, because I think most people sort of have aspirations to progress their career, and so there's sort of an aspirational point to that. But no, generally we're data and AI is only successful where you've got broad buy-in, engagement and commitment from the organisation, and that's more than just the data team. So we think you have to engage, you have to set expectations, you have to get buy-in from other members of the board, and top to bottom, of the business. So everything we do tries to kind of we look at it in kind of make it consumable kind of way. We take complex, or can feel like complex and messy topics, and make them clear and pragmatic and understandable for people that aren't in data. And I think there's a trick there that if we can get that right and get that right more often, everyone wins a bit more.
Yeah. And in the space, I suppose it's hard to define success because it's an ever-evolving journey. So you're not necessarily reaching a destination.
Yeah.
But for you personally, with the business and your other projects, what does success look like?
Oh, God, I don't know. It's just like always moves.
Yes.
It just always gets further away. What does success look like? I suppose there's the point that goes back to our culture thing, which is that what we're doing is fulfilling, and people are feeling in the business certainly that they're not just doing a job, but they're doing something they enjoy and it's moving them forward. So that's sort of success. Obviously, there's a financial success element, which is achieving our targets and or even getting close to them is good, depending on how aggressive you are. But there's something about financial benefit and financial return to me, to the business, to the individuals. That's clearly got to be there. Survival in some ways is obviously a good measure. I mean, we've been going, what is it, 8 years or so, and I always think that's still young, but some don't make it past a year or two. So there's the sort of main ones. It's like that we're turning up and being successful in terms of our longevity, that we're making financial returns for all the people that can get financial returns, and that people's careers that are interacting with the business people are feeling motivated, and then delivering value to customers is the main one, to be honest. Like success for our customer, this whole sort of point about the meaning of Cynozure. It's like, how do we make the person that has sponsored us into the business, because that's who we had the relationship with that made this happen. If we can make them successful, then for me that's as successful as anything.
Absolutely. But the path to success isn't always linear, is it? And for me, certainly, it feels like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah.
So what can you relate to that, firstly?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what have been the main challenges for you then with the business?
So what have been the main challenge? I mean, so in my first year of trading, I had some major kind of health problems that basically I had to put the business on hold for, in the end, only about sort of 3 or 4 months. But in year one, that's quarter of the year. And that was kind of like, what do we do? Do we even keep going or not? And it drove me to kind of carry on and drove me to be successful in the end. So that was a major bump. And we had so at the point of stopping, we had to cancel all the clients, and we didn't have any pipeline, we didn't have anything. So it was like, right, I'm healthy enough to start again, right, let's go. I had to kind of almost start again, but luckily enough of the work that I'd done prior to that gave me a little platform to sort of rebuild from. But so there's that. COVID was a challenge. Actually, through COVID, we managed to thrive from a business performance perspective. Good. But in terms of but that doesn't mean it wasn't a challenge.
No,
it actually meant that we had to really think hard and rethink the business and how we operated and what we did and how we worked and how we supported people in a way that wasn't looking or feeling like we were trying to benefit from the situation, but just to continue to add value. We've done some projects that haven't been as successful, as in sort of internal kind of growth projects that haven't been as successful or moved as fast as we wanted. Those have been the major things really. And but the biggest challenge is like how do you keep staying relevant?
Yeah.
How do you keep adding value, and particularly as this industry has grown and there's more essentially competition in all the things that we've done. It's sort of how do you keep maintaining credibility? How do you keep moving yourself forward and not resting on the success that you had, but thinking about what do people actually need and what does the market actually want from you?
Yeah, because you've got to stay ahead of the curve, really, haven't you? Because rather than waiting for a customer to come to you with a problem, you want to go to them like, have you thought about this? This is the new wave of innovation, for example.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. We try and be quite customer led, actually.
Right,
so
yeah.
we do, but that's not sort of saying wait until they ask us for something. It's more about understanding the need,
sure,
and we have to infer that sometimes. But it's always about listening to what the market needs, and so you can still be innovative in that. Be innovative in terms of how you solve the problem. But yeah, we do advice, right? We advise companies, so we can only advise companies if we are actually a few steps ahead, or at least one step ahead, so that we can sort of share the journey. So AI is a great example. We've done AI over the years and data science and analytics. So we've got the kind of genesis of the things that need doing now, but we've invested heavily in making sure that we've got the credibility, the knowledge, the team, the frameworks and the references that mean that we don't just talk about how to do generative AI, but that we've done generative AI and can help people do that as well and help move them forward. So yeah, we listen and then we innovate around what we feel the market needs.
Yeah, and out of the conversations you're having with new customers, how many of them are driven towards AI?
Most want to talk about it.
Yeah. There is a lot of hype.
Yeah, well, and again, what we do is we try and like cut through the hype and go, right, here's what you need to think about, and customers like that. Everyone wants to talk about it, at least talk about it. Everyone wants to. So everyone's thinking about it. Some are starting to say, actually, can you help us think this through in terms of what it means to us? Just like forget about what we actually need to do, but what does it mean to us? Because we talk a lot about impact, and the impact of AI we think is as big as the impact that the internet was and the combustion engine.
Right.
My CTO James talks about it as being a flattening technology, which is something that kind of like that is needed in the world, and you can't run a business without. So you wouldn't run a business without the internet now.
No.
And we think AI is that. So for some, that's existential. That's like we might have to completely change our business model in order to survive, even with this AI. And for others, it's not going to change the business model, but it's an enabler or a threat for the way they operate. So if someone else out innovates them with AI, can deliver the service to customers cheaper, quicker, then there's a sort of threat, but not an existential one, to how they operate. So people have to get behind it for their operations and how they, drive the business forward.
Yeah.
So everyone's starting to go, right, I think we need to think about this, and we need some help understanding what it means, and we need to understand what is it we might need to do, and then there's a choice about whether you do it or not.
Yeah. I mean, companies do need to evolve anyway. And, those who are change adverse, not just from an AI perspective, but generally are the ones that get left behind, So especially if you're giving advice and that's the way the market's going. So are there any sectors that you think are early adopters of AI who are getting it right?
I guess mainstream-wise, there's not really as a sector rule. I think any digital native business, so you kind of, e-com kind of businesses, and anyone that's sort of pure digital, really, they've been doing sort of quite high-end AI and analytics for a long time, and are able to pivot and are able to embed things like generative AI quite quickly, because their mindset, their culture, their way of doing change, their way of doing product development is such that they can.
It's very agile,
Yeah, they're agile in that respect, exactly. So I think there's sort of the general sort of digital, technical, and change maturity of a business, and that tends to be the ones that are digital natives of this world, are the ones that are kind of getting to it a bit quicker. But equally, I think we're working with a couple of charities actually, and they're like really, really bullish about it, and they really think it's an opportunity to do something differently. I was actually, and then I suppose another angle is I was at a sort of founders, entrepreneur sort of dinner, and every single founder around that table was thinking about, how do I not recruit and use AI instead? So, and then the other half of the conversation was, how do we stop AI from taking over? It's like, well, don't do what we just said we'll do. But you can see people going, well, instead of recruiting 5 more people in the call center, how do I build something that deals with the customer contacts? Or instead of more kind of like warehousing space, how do I get more effective and efficient with how I manage our products and our supply chain so that I don't need more space? And so you can see people thinking about it, embedding it in much earlier and much quicker. But I haven't yet seen a pattern with who's getting there quickest and who's getting there fastest. But I do know that the ones that are a bit more leap of faith about how they do things, and wanting to and able to sort of test and learn and invest some R&D money and innovation money in this thing, will get there quicker than the ones that are navel gazing. The ones that come up with a plan and make some choices are the ones that will sort of get there a bit quicker. I mean, there is certainly opportunity in every sector, for sure. Do you see a hesitancy, like a real hesitancy with certain individuals or businesses, where you think if you don't change, you're going to be redundant in the next 5 years? Well, I definitely see some hesitancy. I can't say that word. Where people and it's more around generative AI and the sort of chat GPT kind of tools where it's almost like giving everyone Excel and allowing it to access all the data at once, if only. So it's sort of such a accessible and potentially damaging and opportunity, but people that are worried about it will feel it's damaging, that they just put the blockers on. Again, a number of our customers have just put a blanket ban, can't use. But you can't, it's one of the things that you can't stop. I can download it on my phone and use these things. So there's definitely hesitancy. There's also there's a lot of lack of clarity and knowledge about what this whole thing is. And, we were in an exec meeting a couple of weeks ago with a customer, and you had one side of the table going, we've got to do this now. And you had the other side of the table saying, what the hell's chat GPT? Really? So and you had some people saying, nah, it's not going to be much. Maybe we'll implement it in a few places. And some people saying, no, we literally have to fundamentally change how we think about this part of our business. So you've got such sort of disparity about understanding and clarity of what the thing is and how much impact it will have, that creates some uncertainty. So you're always going to get anything new, though. You're going to get that. And because there's so much hype, you end up with skepticism. Some people get bought, they're all in on the hype, and the other group of people are sort of makes them more skeptical about it. As I say, I think you just need pragmatism here and a sensible brain, and we do think the organisation shouldn't just go on, it's just hype. They should actually think about what they do, and they might choose not to do anything, and that might be the right answer, but at making an active choice once you've got all the information and the knowledge and the know-how on it, it's more effective that way. I think it's like the understanding and the education around it as well, isn't it? Because we've all seen those posts on LinkedIn where you're like, that's just ChatGPT. That's just lazy, because I use it, but in my tone, and I give great direction, and I could say, just make this sentence flow a bit more, for example. But people just put, write me a post about this, and then they just post it. And it's like, you don't use those words. Well, LinkedIn, for example, just does that. There's the tools that just say, write me a post on something, and you can. I can tell most of the time. So much so that it's a bit almost like the reverse. Sort of the Turing test, isn't it? It's like, is this written by AI? And sometimes you get that wrong. But I don't know. I think humans are humans, right? They're going to be lazy. We're looking for the fast track. And it is great, and it enablizes efficiency for sure. I do utilize it, but it's like you can't just copy and paste whatever it says without even reading it yourself. You can, but if you care about authenticity and uniqueness and your own voice, then it becomes a negative. So the the benefit you've received by doing something quickly is then, I think, you lose the benefit of that.
It's counteracted, yeah.
It's counteracted by the fact that you're it's obvious.
I know, but I don't know why to them it's not obvious. But it's just but again, it's only as good as the data. It's only as good as the instruction that you give it.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I've kind of worked that out for myself. I'm not super technical, but there's no guidance around that really. Well, there might be. Is there in certain businesses?
For Chat GPT, so there's this thing called prompt engineering, which is like being good at asking questions. And there's frameworks for how you ask questions.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. There's loads of cheat sheets around that sort of say, how to get the most out of a large language model and how feeding it, what kind of mode you want them in and what tone you want and how creative you want it. It was always sort of special tricks. But prompt engineering is
I'll have a look at that. Okay.
Phrase,
yeah, we definitely need help with that because some people in my business, they're just like, no, don't like it. It doesn't do what I want it to do. And I'm like,
yeah.
Need help
There's some really creative things you can and ways you can use it beyond just kind of write me a post.
Amazing. Okay, I'll check that out. Right, well, we're going to move on to the quickfire data lightning round.
Oh, okay.
What's one common misconception about data that you'd like to debunk?
Oh no, you said quickfire, so I need a quick answer. I guess that it's about data.
Yes.
I don't know if you've had that answer before, but of course data is about data, but the value comes from things beyond just the data itself. It's the use, it's the execution, it's the creativity, it's the way you take action from what you see.
Yeah, brilliant. We've not had that one.
Okay.
I like it. Name a book, event or podcast that you think every data enthusiast should explore.
Well, of course, book they should read is Data Means Business, which I wrote with my co-author Barry Green. But I also think, I can't think of names of books off the top of my head right now, but I think anything that is around being entrepreneurial and agile and like how you develop propositions, I think is a really important skill for people in data because it teaches you about, commercial awareness and being reactive and responsive, being iterative in how you do things, thinking about the sort of the end goal that you're trying to achieve. So I think anything in that space of being agile, being entrepreneurial just helps bring a different way of thinking about sort of activities that you do.
Yeah. Okay. If you could offer one piece of advice to someone just starting their journey into the world of data, what would that be?
Care as much about the commercial or business impact of what you're doing as you do the data work that's being put in. So, and by that I mean, ultimately data is successful if it makes some kind of change and impact in an organisation. So, care about that. I'd say as much, but I think more than the actual sort of hands-on data work that you might do. Yeah.
Okay. Finish this sentence. Data is the key to.
A better tomorrow.
Love that. In your opinion, what will be the most significant development in the world of data in the next 5 years?
I think generative AI and generative AI, I think is going to be the biggest one. Yeah, it's here to stay. Not hype. Is a flattening technology. Is as impactful as the internet. And the more you get behind it now and understand it now and make some choices now, the more you'll be able to feel the benefit of that. That sort of major change.
Brilliant. I nailed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.